Watch out for this possible ballot rigging scam. Okay, so ladies and gentlemen, a very good friend of mine described what happened to him at an advanced polling station. And it really seems like it could be a possible ballot rigging scam in Canada's federal election. Now, this is just an anecdotal story of one vote in one advanced polling station. However, there is a little bit more to this story than just my friend's account. First, let me describe what happened. When my friend arrived at the polling station, he said it really stood out to him that the line for one particular table was so long. He had never seen anything like this before. And it happened to be the line that he was sent to. He said that line went right out the door. Another thing I should point out is that my friend noticed the deputy returning officer handing out the ballots and then taking them back and folding them and doing all that stuff. And he said it just seemed odd. And he decided he was really going to keep a close eye on the deputy returning officer. He wondered if she was reading the votes. So when he arrived at the table, he said there were two returning officers sitting side by side. There was a gentleman on the left, I believe, who never looked up at him. He was the fellow who would find your name and cross you off the list. So my friend handed this gentleman his identification and his voting card. And he said it took this gentleman perhaps a couple of minutes to find his name. It stood out to my friend that this gentleman announced my friend's name quite loudly and then proceeded to look through all these papers on his desk. And he said he shuffled the papers back and forth maybe 5 or 6 times before he finally found my friend's name. And then he turned to the lady next to him who was handing out the ballots. And he said, I better look this up. I got my friend to voice dictate this. Like a whole report on what happened. The gentleman turned to the lady next to him who was handing out the ballots and said, "You may need extra ballots." And my friend said, I was confused about why he would say this. At this point, he crossed my name off the list and the woman gave me what I thought was one ballot. And it was folded, but it was still kind of open. So I took it behind the screen. I cast my vote with an X and I brought it back to her. My friend goes on to say, as soon as I handed what I thought was one ballot to her, she immediately and very quickly, with sleight of hand, separated it into 2 ballots. And at that point, I realized that she didn't hand me one ballot. She handed me 2 ballots, one stacked over the other. So she separated the 2 very quickly and was about to remove the tab from the ballot that was not marked with the desk number and her signature on it and handed that back to me to put in the ballot box. My friend then says, I immediately called her attention and said, whoa, stop. That's not my ballot. My ballot is the one on your desk. She then switched the ballots and began to remove the tab from the marked ballot. Then I told her, wait a second, that doesn't have the desk number written on the back of the ballot. And she simply pointed to my name on the list in front of her and said, oh no, don't worry about that. It doesn't have to correspond. Now, I got my friend to show me how this went down with napkins and stuff. So I'm going to try to replicate as best as I can what happened. When my friend showed up to the voting desk, he was handed what he believed was one ballot. Looked like this. The deputy returning officer who was handing out the ballots took it and folded it over here. I believe this is how the process goes. Folded it here to cover up these little circles where you mark your X. And then folded it again. All right, following me? Folded it again. And then you've got this tab sticking out. Now this tab, you write the desk number on it, something like this maybe, all right? Wrote the desk number. We're just going to write desk number 1, 2, 3, all right? Something like that. My friend then takes this ballot, opens it up, all right? I believe this is how it went down. Opens it up, marks it with an X, all right, folds it back up, and goes to hand it in. Now, I think I've messed this up a little bit. I did. I messed it up. The tab was written on the back. All right. 1, 2, 3. And I think a signature. Maybe a signature here and maybe a signature here. All right. Something like that. Then, if I'm understanding the sleight of hand that was used, my friend hands this, what he believed was one ballot, back to the deputy returning officer. The deputy returning officer then detached this tab, right? It's got the writing on it. I hope this shows up in the video. It's got the writing on it, writing on the back, writing on it. These match, signature matches. Okay, detaches it. And then with sleight of hand says, there you go. There you go. There's your ballot. We'll just fold that up nice for you. There you go. Now you can go cast that. But if you notice, there's more than a tab here. There's a whole other ballot. This one that was handed back has no vote. There's no vote on it. It's not marked. The marked ballot was left on the desk. That's how it went down. My friend was handed back a ballot that was not the one that he marked. Fortunately, my friend was keeping a close eye on this deputy returning officer, and he said, whoa, 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 that's not my ballot. My ballot is still on your desk. My friend then, asked a number of questions like, well, hey, wait a minute. My ballot, the ballot that's marked, doesn't have your signature on the back or anything like that. Is it still going to be counted? The lady said, oh yeah, don't worry about it. It'll be counted. My friend then asked to speak to his supervisor right there at the polling station. He did. I'm not going to give the names. My friend has the names of the deputy returning officers, the supervisor at the polling station, but I've decided not to disclose those because, you know what? This could have just been some sort of weird accident, and everybody is innocent until proven guilty, so I don't want to give out any of those names. But my friend filed a report with the supervisor right at the polling station. He got the number of the person who is in charge of that particular electoral riding with Elections Canada and eventually got in touch with her. And here's where the story gets a little more interesting. My friend described all of the details of what happened to this person at Elections Canada. And that person said, yes, we've had a number of complaints about that polling station and those particular individuals, and they will not be returning tomorrow. So this was not the first complaint that Elections Canada had received about these particular individuals, these particular deputy returning officers at that particular polling station. So the question at this point was this an accident? Was this just incompetence? If it was intentional, is it just a couple of bad apples? Or is this some sort of systematic attempt at rigging the ballots in this federal election? So my suggestion to you is when you get your ballot, make sure that it's just one ballot and not two folded together. If it's two, don't try to cast two votes, because then you might end up looking like you're trying to interfere with the election. You might be accused of trying to commit some sort of voter fraud. So I would suggest you just bring it to the attention of the deputy returning officer and say, hey, you handed me two ballots. The other thing that I've noticed looking up the procedures from Elections Canada is you do have the option of telling the deputy returning officer that you wish to hold on to your ballot while the deputy returning officer tears off the tab. So that's another thing you can do. When they remove the tab, you have the option of holding on to your ballot and just letting them tear off the tab without it ever leaving your hands. And then you can put it in the box. So I'm going to suggest you do those two things. Make sure you just have one ballot and then hold on to it as they tear off the tab and then place it in the box. Ladies and gentlemen, I certainly hope this is not some sort of widespread attempt at election rigging, but it certainly does not hurt to be careful. So be aware, be careful, and keep an eye out for this kind of ballot switching that may or may not be occurring at a larger scale during this particular federal election.